Hi, I'm Trevor Mallard. Most years a speaker takes a delegation away to a variety of countries. The reason for going to Africa was that there are a lot of countries there, a lot of them with good links to New Zealand, and we haven't really given them the attention that we should. At the moment, there's not a large amount of trade that happens from Turkey, Rwanda or Ethiopia. And one of our objectives was just to look at where the potential areas might be. We could have positive trade relationships where we can do the things that we're good at and we can import areas in which they specialise. We went in the aftermath of the terrorist attack in Christchurch, and that was a focal point in all three countries. People acknowledged that New Zealand was generally a very safe place, that this was a tragedy, and also acknowledged the fact that New Zealand handled it really well. People were impressed at the way that New Zealanders had embraced the people from the mosques after the tragedy.
The thing that really interested me in Ethiopia was the situation of women. There is an enormous number of displaced persons in the millions. And of course, for any family, and particularly for women that often are leading those families, living as a displaced person is enormously stressful and enormously difficult. We visited the Hamline Fistula Trust, which is just outside Addis Ababa. It was set up by a couple of doctors from Australia and New Zealand, and it was working with women who have been damaged during childbirth.
So it was a wonderful visit to learn about the work that they're doing, the operations, the surgeries, but also about how they work with those women to empower them and give them the skills to start their own businesses and to basically start a new life.
It was great to be at the African Union having meetings with the leaders and key players there. The African Union represents 50 plus nations across the African continent, a real powerhouse trying to connect the continent.
It's a place where lots of African countries are represented at a high level, where a lot of discussions occur going forward. That's going to be something which is important to New Zealand, because there's no way that we'll be able to be represented diplomatically in all the African countries. So it'll be a matter of using the union.
We received an incredibly warm welcome from Ethiopia, connected to the history way back in 1935 when New Zealand took a stand to defend their independence when Italy, led by Mussolini, invaded. What that was a real reminder to me is just how long-term foreign policy in the world is, and how over a long period you can sow the seeds for your country in having a good reputation.
We chose to go to Rwanda because it is the 25th anniversary of the genocide there. New Zealand played a very important role in the United Nations in trying to prevent the genocide. Our representatives pushed for there to be more peacekeeping troops. We were unsuccessful. This was just an immense tragedy.
We attended the genocide memorial. I don't mind saying that I was in buckets of tears throughout most of that experience, learning about the absolute horror of what had happened. However, the story that they told was done in such a way as to give us hope and to also warn us of the ingredients of genocide.
I'm not a big crier, but I did cry at the Genocide Commemoration Museum. It was heartbreaking seeing the impact of the genocide on that society, that 10% plus of their population were killed over a tragic 6-week period. However, I was incredibly proud to also learn of the positive role New Zealand played at the time on the UN Security Council 25 years ago. We had an incredibly warm welcome from the Rwandan people, the Rwandan government. They remembered that we stood up in their time of need, one of the only countries in the world.
The lessons for me is actually the world needs to be uncompromising in its opposition to genocide, including the use of military intervention. Really reinforced for me the importance of the United Nations, its strength and learning from that enormous failure.
While we were with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we presented to him 5 bound volumes of documents, which were essentially the cables. They were the record of our discussions between our UN post in Wellington and with other nations during the time that we were chairing the Security Council in 1994. We're the first country to do that, and what the Rwandans really appreciated was that we were giving them our, up until then, sometimes classified documentation so that they could go back and they could see the background in the United Nations and in other countries.
The resilience that community has shown after a devastating effects of the genocide. But there's lots of positives coming out of Rwanda. They're thinking to the future, they're thinking to their new generations coming through. And one of the visits I particularly enjoyed was to the African Improved Foods Factory, a magnificently run factory. It is part of an international consortium who have set up a social enterprise to produce nutritious food, to avoid the stunting and the malnutrition that we've seen in so many of African countries.
Rwanda has been somewhere I've always wanted to visit, particularly because they have nearly 65% of women in parliament, which is absolutely aspirational.
One of the things that we visited there was a company called Ampersand, which is producing electric motorbikes. There was a guy called Josh Vale. Josh and his team have found a way of putting a battery into them, getting the battery in and out really quickly. A really good example of an innovative New Zealander making a difference in Africa.
All of us MPs, we had one day off over the 15, 16 days we travelled, and some of us elected to go see the gorillas. Now, this was self-funded. There is 1,004 gorillas left in the world. The gorillas were all around us. We trekked into the hills. All of the community benefits from the visits to the gorillas. Just an amazing experience.
The main reason for going to Turkey was that we were representing New Zealand at the Anzac commemorations. I really want to place on record my thanks to the service people and the people from Veteran Support for the leadership that they showed in the commemorations and the way that they helped bring New Zealanders and Australians together was something that was very, very special, made me proud to be a New Zealander.
The memories are still there, they're present, and it was wonderful to be at the New Zealand ceremony with such strong elements of Māori culture, haka, waiata, a sense of informality to accompany the respect and the memory.
A special highlight for me was my niece, who was at the New Zealand Anzac ceremony, and she was directing the 4 guards who come to the service and then the haka.
We were very warmly welcomed everywhere we went in Turkey. We were particularly welcomed to the Parliament, and the Speaker spent time with us explaining how their Parliament worked, and that was an interesting visit in itself. And then of course we met President Erdogan.
This is a particularly tense time after the mosque attacks. The relationship with Turkey that historically has been very good has taken a bit of a bump, and it's my view that this cross-party speakers delegation was able to sort of resettle the relationship between New Zealand and Turkey.
New Zealanders might find it hard to believe, but we had a diverse group of members of Parliament who went away, who worked really well together in the interests of the country. I'll always remember the trip, but more importantly, I think that each of us made a real contribution, and it can make a difference to how well our country goes socially, culturally and economically in the long term by doing this sort of work.